Hello there, guys. It's that anxious gamer, and today I'm going to be doing a little bit of a podcast format. And so here is my co-host. Let him introduce himself.
Hi, hello, this is Griff, and this is not a vid rip, but yeah, I'm been casting very casual StarCraft for a very long time, for a small community at least, and yeah, Stormgate is a thing everyone's talking about, so maybe we should as well.
Absolutely. So yeah, we're going to kind of be breaking this down into segments, guys. Breaking this podcast into two main parts. And for the first segment, we're going to be talking about the RTS gaming community landscape, what we feel about how the RTS space is right now, where we're at in 2023 and where we're seeing that things will be going in the near future. So why don't you start out and tell me what your thoughts are?
Yeah, so for a long time, everyone's been repeating the same thing, right? I mean, RTS is dead. Period. That's it. There's a
Definitely.
couple of little groups. You had Brood War clinging to life. Then StarCraft Two was still somewhat active in the esports and stuff. Of course, we're ignoring Korea, right? Korea
Definitely.
is a different thing, especially in terms of Brood War.
It's
But
totally different. Yeah.
oddly enough, there is also a foreign world outside of it.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, there have been these little projects and little things, but really for or let's say the kids playing their first games online or getting into communities online, RTS doesn't exist. The closest thing
definitely.
being Dota and League of Legends, but also having a very closed community there as well. So yeah, it's for me, RTS is Brood War, right?
Yeah.
And the people you met a decade ago. And right now, we see these little flies, Stormgate being the most prevalent, mostly because of, you know, the assassination of StarCraft 2.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely. And we're going to be getting into that. Um,
yeah. So right now, suddenly you start looking, and there's so many of these little projects that are now finally coming to fruition. The timing all seems to be lining up together.
yeah.
So it's going to be very interesting.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Like I've heard this bandied about. I mean, this isn't something I came up with. I've heard a lot of people talk about this. Is that 2023, 2024 is going to be, the years of the RTS revival as a genre, and I think that's absolutely the case. I think the way I look at the landscape right now, RTS has always been fractionated. It's always been my community versus your community, very similar to the kind of PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, or whatever you want to say, Nintendo versus Sony versus Microsoft gaming communities. RTSs are kind of the same way. Age of Empires, you're an Age of Empires player, you're over here. If you're a Brood War player, you're over here. If you're a StarCraft 2 player, you're over here. And it's very granular. It's very like you're in with this group and that's it. You don't play other games. Um, Obviously, that was a thought process and a way of thinking that was more prevalent in the past. I think nowadays in 2023, I think that a lot of people that are a little bit younger and that are coming up in gaming do not subscribe to this way of thinking. And I think that the RTS gaming landscape is going to change rapidly. We have all these smaller projects that are kind of going to be exploding on the market at the same time. And we have some of the old guard, like we were just, briefly mentioning, like StarCraft 2, that is kind of on its way out the door, at least in my opinion. However, like you said, Korea is its own totally different thing. And I think when you're talking about RTS, you could basically say that North America and Europe, there may have some differences, like Oceania, all of that may have some differences. But really, when you talk about RTS, you can kind of, break it up into Korea being its own thing, and then the rest of the world being radically different. So that's the way I look at the RTS gaming landscape in 2023 is that 2023 is a transitional year from probably 2024 and onwards going to be the new guard, and 2023 from literally like maybe 2010, there's been kind of a set way of of the RTS landscape, other than maybe like Age of Empires 4 coming out. But really, not much has happened in a very long time, and RTS players have kind of known what group they were playing with, and so I am pretty excited about what's happening.
Yeah, it's you know because it's going to be strange to introduce new players because that's one of the things that
Mhm.
concerns a lot of people. I mean, the
Definitely,
thing with, for instance, with Brood War and older games as well. Before the podcast mentioned Quake is in the same
yeah,
bracket. You have this, and honestly, I've got a good example of recent times where this happened as well. When you are beginning, as if everybody is starting at the same time, right? There, when Brood War was beginning, there wasn't a lot of information sharing, so small communities of friends and channels on BattleNet would do their discoveries, and it would genuinely very slowly propagate around the community.
yeah.
Now games get solved very quickly, um, and if you are not part of that active community that is playing the game, then as a casual, you get left behind immediately, right?
I think so. Yeah,
Um, and a nice example of that, because I thought games had been grinded down to a point where this wouldn't be the case anymore. But look at what happened to Fortnite recently, where they
yeah,
had the problem with the builders. They removed building and I think it's completely gone now, or at least it's the least popular. Building is now the least popular mode that they're playing right now.
yeah.
Um,
I believe
that's
that's the case.
the 14-year-olds are now 16 and 17-year-olds,
Yeah,
and they're doing this at a
building.
level that is impossible to follow. And yeah, they saw a stagnation and
Well, it's
immediately took action.
isn't that weird though that you have an idea there of so I always will put this on League of Legends. And why do I bring League of Legends up? Because League of Legends is, I would say, one of the only games that's been around for a very long time, changes all the time, but still has some sort of, uh, I guess you would want to say, game identity, if that makes sense. It isn't the same game that was out in 2010, League of Legends today in 2023, but I've been playing it for years. And I will say this, you still get that same League of Legends feel or the community. Um, Fortnite, I personally don't play very much, but I do know a lot of people, a lot of friends that do play. And since the whole building controversy and, basically, like you said, building is almost completely gone now. That was a major gameplay component. That would be like in StarCraft 2, if you just said, hey, we're not going to micro units, we're just going to macro and then A move them together. It would be that big of a
Mechanical skill
shift.
that get removed.
Yeah, it is a mechanical skill that gets removed. And unfortunately, I feel that that may eventually be to the detriment of the game, not because obviously you do want to onboard people, and that will help onboard people by making the game simpler. But there's so many battle royale games. Like I personally play Apex Legends, and I enjoy it casually. Um, I feel like Fortnite's one of its big things that made it special was it kind of had that bit of Minecraft in it, where the mechanical skill of actually building these buildings was significant. So I feel like by taking that out, you do list the player population. You have to make it where we're onboarding people, but we're keeping a game's core identity. And that's why I think it's important, like what we're going to be talking about in segment 2, and kind of how Stormgate, when it enters the market, it's important that you give the fans, give the audiences a certain feel that the game is going to have throughout its life. Not saying you won't change components, but you're keeping the game, the soul, if you want to call it that, of the game in one specific direction, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because the one thing the almost intentional instability of League of Legends and Dota, like, well, it's slowed down a little bit and it was different, but there have been
Definitely.
incredible big changes in metagame deliberately, or
Huge.
stabilized the metagame when it was figured out, right?
Definitely.
But that is something that, uh, especially towards the Brood War crowd, maybe not as much throughout towards the StarCraft 2 crowd, because StarCraft 2 also had those things. They had big balance shifts, right?
They did. They
And
did.
because there was actually recently a very big thread, or little Reddit moment, let's say, on the Stormgate subreddit, where people were saying like, you have to keep the game static. No, you have to change it. And it was like this big camp, and you could smell the Brood War players in there,
Yeah.
because Brood War's last balance patch was in 2001,
Yes.
and the
So
only way to balance it was maps.
mm, it was.
And actually, yeah, I saw the interview with Tim Morton, from StarCraft historian here. I watched that one to catch up a little bit, and he mentions that, like, the balance through maps, and it's important. But what is now going to happen? We've had time, right? In my video that I posted on my channel before, the Mutalisk micro. What is Stormgate's Mutalisk micro going to be? What is going to be a mechanical breaking point, an exploit that has to be decided? Is this emergent gameplay, or is this a problem? Whereas with Fortnite, yes, okay, fine, we're going there.
Yeah.
Fortnite, the mechanical skill was deemed a problem.
Yeah.
And even though I am an advocate for the casual player, I am also a competitive gaming fundamentalist a little bit. You need the balance for the top.
You
And
do have
if your
to balance
game
for the
cannot
top.
be fun at the bottom because of that, then there is a flaw, and your game will not be an esport.
Definitely. I mean, I think that's just one of those things, right, where people put this as a mutually exclusive thing. What they do is they say, well, if you're balancing for the top, the bottom can't be fun. And I think when people say things like that, it just exposes that, okay, so now what you're really saying, what you're really trying to get across is that the game itself is fundamentally flawed, because what you're saying is it can't be fun and balanced at the same time. I don't think that's definitely something that should be aimed for at all. Like you said, I think that introducing people to a competitive esport, to a game, is one thing. You can make modes where you can ease that transition and get them in. And that's something that both Brood War and StarCraft 2 did not do well. They did not introduce people to the game in a very friendly way. I will tell you my journey. My
I'll
journey
respond to
for
that real
StarCraft
quick.
2 was insane. I never played a major RTS before. So this was back in 2010. I'd never played a major RTS. And I remember when I started playing StarCraft 2, I lost significant, like basically every game. I want to say every game, for around 2.5 to 3 months on the multiplayer ladder, just to get, just to get used to things. And that's something I enjoyed. I love that. I love getting better. Fighting games have this
And
kind
that
of
tiny
element.
percentage that does, yeah.
Right. But that's not the majority. And if you have that kind of feel in a game and you don't give people other opportunities, like we've seen in StarCraft 2 with co-op, it can be dangerous. It can be dangerous. And, that's something Stormgate's going to have to address, is how to get the game in the hands of the people and give them enough incentive to get through that period of transition. That's what I say.
Yeah. So, because I want to point out that's an important thing that I haven't seen discussed before. And it's one thing
No.
that is maybe a little strange to put forward, but that is a feature request that Stormgate must have,
Yeah.
which is built in a built-in way to convey emergent gameplay to the player. Like, if they are going to spend development time on one thing for their casual audience, well, apart from a few other things, but an important segment should be that you have evolving tutorials
Definitely.
inside of the game, because not a lot of people are going outside the game to learn if they're a casual. They have to learn it through. And this is the problem. You say Brood War doesn't do a good job at that. Well, barring the fact that it's old enough to have a family.
Yeah, exactly. That's the
The
Game design was different.
because it wasn't designed with that in mind.
Exactly.
And that is one of the big schisms between Brood War and StarCraft 2.
Definitely.
The campaign for Brood War, when we tell people, they come into our channels and they say, I want to learn Brood War. And we're like, okay, yes, you do. We say first, play the campaign, right? Because it has one and it's a good story. I will not divulge on this.
Right.
Very important point. It's religion, you see. But no, the game does a good job explaining the units, and this is minerals, this is gas, this is a tech tree, the fundamentals of RTS that, by the way, are now out of the window if you're not a Dota player. So this is how we play the game. Great. Here are the 3 races. Great. Protoss sucks. Zerg is great. Perfect. We understand. Then you mosey on into the beautiful world of competitive online.
Yeah.
Ha-ha.
There you go.
And that's where we say, to people, listen, you still like the game? Great. You're going to lose 50 times. Then you're going to lose 50 times more. Then you're going to get a bit of an idea of what you're doing. And you might win one game. And that's when we'll try to start. And if you don't want to do that, this is not the game for you.
Definitely.
That's not great for a game.
No.
Because that is what it is now. You are backtracking 20 years of history.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
The difference with StarCraft 2 that I wanted to point out real quick. StarCraft 2 assumed you already knew all of that. And they assumed that the audience was big enough. It might have been for a little while until everyone got sick of it, because the game was hyper competitive, was even more competitive than Brood War, I would say, in its design. And I feel like we're going at a bridge like that again.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying.
Here's what I think about the StarCraft 2 thing. So how did it relate to Brood War? What did it do different? I agree with you 100%. StarCraft 2, if there was a game that was developed, pushed, and marketed for a competitive community, there's been almost no game like it since or before. StarCraft 2 was extremely devoted to the competitive community, to the point of being where I had friends. I got in, I believe, like somewhere in 2010. So I did not play the beta, but I played early wings. And at that point, I'm very lucky. The player population was very high. And this is one of the things that I will say about StarCraft 2 was I met people and played with people that joined 2014, 2015, 2016. A lot of people, when it went free to play, they have a completely different experience of the game. And the reason is that StarCraft 2, and we're shaping up for Stormgate to be the exact same thing. There's an onboarding period. It's like a train, and you have a ticket and there's a window that you have to get on the train. And if you're not on that train when that window closes, it's extremely hard to ever catch up. We see this with Brood War extremely. We see this with StarCraft 2 probably even worse, where honestly, even though I would say definitely, go play the StarCraft 2 campaign, have a blast. Blizzard makes great games in that era, and StarCraft 2's campaign is great. However, I can't recommend that for actually learning how to play StarCraft 2. I played StarCraft 2 for over 10 years. I played from 2010 to about 2022. I retired about a year ago and said, you know what? I don't like the direction we're going. I don't think it will ever change. The Blizzard intern is not going to be able to fix the game by himself. That's it. But I played for a long time. And I hope that Stormgate learns from this lesson of we need to have a more continuous onboarding. We need to have more detailed tutorials. And as mechanics get learned in the game, as people discover on YouTube, okay, well, this is how we do things. This is how we do basically like the emergent gameplay, the mutalist micro. That needs to actually then be rolled by the developers into in-game tutorials to actually get people up through a gradual building stage, right? We're having a gradual tutorialization all the way to where, you can compete in bronze or silver league. That's what you need. You need to be able to get from I've never played the game to I can win some matches in bronze or silver. That's all you need. But unfortunately, uh, for StarCraft 2, that is worlds apart. I wouldn't even say that a campaign player could win consistently in bronze. I really don't think so. And as for tutorializations in StarCraft 2, it's basically non existent.
Yeah. And getting something from one of the topics I wrote down here.
Yeah.
One of my fears is that because this is, and again, to stipulate, I am aware that Frost Giant is aware, right? And these guys have been on the money for a few of these things, and they have mentioned that they know, right? And you see elements already entering, and there's quite a few people who probably are screaming the same things from the top of the hills on a daily basis,
Definitely.
right? But it bears repeating because again, I come from I witnessed the StarCraft 2 alpha, and as we'll talk maybe later, this scenario has happened multiple times in multiple communities as well. It just happens that StarCraft and RTS is a big name, right? But there's a reason why nobody's playing it anymore.
Yeah,
but
pretty much.
They are basically, let's call them the co-op team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they want to solve the campaign problem with a co-op that they can balance, that they can update.
Yeah.
But because I've, for instance, I think it was Day9 who had, I just saw him when he was playing Rogue Command, which is it's like a roguelike RTS game.
Okay.
That's got a demo out right now.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's wish listable. There's a free demo on it, and it's really cool. It's RTS single player game with roguelike elements. But somebody asked in his chat, like, "Hey, I want to start StarCraft 2. How do I do that?" And he referenced them to the co-op because it's a nice micro environment to learn the game. And yes, this is true for RTS fundamentals.
Yeah,
but one thing, this guy is playing this game, is playing the co-op, having fun. It's great learning the game. But if you then transfer over again to what us competitive folk call the real game.
Yeah, I was going to say that too. Like I was literally going to parrot that same thing, the real game. Yeah.
Yeah. Then things are going to be different.
They're going to be very different.
Is that about, okay, do we give people not enough credit? No, of course not, because that segment that has always been here, that competitive player, the person who wants to get beaten to a pulp 50 times and to finally win a game, that person is fine. That is perfectly okay.
Yeah, it is.
These people are here. They are already here.
They'll always be here. Yeah, they're being born every day. But they're the 1%. They're not going to keep a game alive, as we've seen time and time again. Of even though they're kind of the bedrock of your community, they're going to stick through your game. They're going to stay there 5, 7 years later, 10 years later, keep playing your game. The problem is if you just focus on them, it's going to be very hard, I think, in 2023 to sustain a game long term, just for these players, unless you get to a ridiculous level like League of Legends, unless you become one of the biggest games in the world, and even that competitive community is still fairly large. For most games, I feel like it isn't. You can't just rely on that, and I don't think co-op. I've heard the same thing from Day9. I've heard people parrot this statement. Okay, you've done the campaign, you want to get into competitive, play co-op. Personally, I think it's a bit of a cop-out, in my opinion. I think it is a cop-out. I think they're intending well. They are trying to help the person. But as we just talked about here, playing co-op is not the same as playing competitive. And if somebody feels like, oh, I've done some co-op missions now, I'm going to be able to hit gold or platinum or higher in the competitive ladder, or they feel like they, really understand the game at a fundamental level, I would say that's probably incorrect. I would say that instead, learning a competitive game is actually broken down into several humongous things, like several very, very different skills. You have the muscle memory skills, right? You have to actually be able to utilize your keyboard, set control groups, do micro actions. But there's also a huge amount of theoretical knowledge you need about units. And I've noticed a lot of people in StarCraft 2, they don't, like for instance, in Brood War, they don't understand the damage types. For StarCraft 2, they don't understand what unit counters another unit, how these units can kind of work together in army composition, all of that. So, that's information I gained, like you said, outside the game. I used to watch every night before bed. I would come home from work and, my routine was I would listen to StarCraft 2 content for hours, literally hours a day. So you absorb that just over time, like any skill. But again, that's pulling away from what I think the game needs to do, which is teach these things in game, have video tutorials in game, have tournaments in game. Try to keep as much of the learning inside the game client as possible, because the old method of just here's the game, now you learn it, kind of like chess. You have to read books, you have to watch YouTube tutorials. That just is very hard for a lot of people. They don't like that in 2023. They don't associate with that. And it's hard for them to get onboarded in that same way.
Yeah. And I think, though, is that a bad thing? Because you are, for Brood War and other, like, you say Quake.
Yeah,
You see guys bouncing off the walls, rocket jumping everywhere, and then it's whoa, right? Yeah, no, it was a casual game at LANs. The first time I played Quake, it was just for fun,
yeah,
because and that stamped the Brood War as well. We played Brood War for fun. What did I play mostly? Because I was the thing. Mostly I'm good at first person shooters. I will forever be bad at StarCraft, but I will forever love it as well. But we played badly. That's what the whole premise of my channel is.
yeah.
Players after 20 years still being awful and not really caring and playing casually. Free for alls, 4v4s, 3v3s. Yes, even fastest. Yes, even buh, buh, big game hunters. I
Yeah.
almost, I can't say it. Same thing, the split with the UMS. But that is a different thing, because then you're playing a different game. You're no longer, you're
Definitely.
doing the co-op, right?
Yeah.
But the actual game was the casual version.
Yeah.
And the toys that the big pros played with on the maps they played with, we were playing on it as well. It is kind of like you're a kid you're playing basketball or soccer or whatever you want, and you're playing on the same kind of field with the same kind of ball and doing the same kind of things in your brain than the pros, right?
That's right. Yep.
Why would we associate? Because one of the first articles I ever wrote for StarCraft was for SCTUGG was StarCraft the sport. Like, it is a sport, esport. Sure, no, it's an activity,
Right.
and the thing is, it needs to be treated like that.
Yeah.
But there's a requirement in current gaming that you're here's a basketball, there's LeBron, go.
Yeah.
You're playing with
Absolutely.
him now.
Yeah.
And that's what can happen in RTS today. You can, that's
Yeah.
you bumping into that. And you suddenly thrown onto that with the expectations like you're going to the fucking finals.
So
And no, I just want to play I have a ball, I want to play, I want to shoot some hoops, it's fine. And so, you're one of those guys? Oh,
yeah.
well, there's the ball pit with the kids. Go to do that. Don't play the real game.
Yeah. Definitely. So here's something that I
No.
feel is super is super important. This is one thing that I will say, and I have some things that I'm really happy with Stormgate, and some things I'm really not happy with Stormgate. But one thing that I'm very happy with, I think that they have done right, and I think that will be very helpful for the game, is that by doing the free to play model And unfortunately, in 2023, whenever you're discussing a game, I think you have to discuss its monetization model. And the way that Stormgate is doing things will bring in more players in. Now, how is that so important? Why is that so critical? Because in order to not play with LeBron, in order for me to queue up on Rank Ladder and Stormgate and not play against Vibe or let's say like, Tasteless or, people that have been playing a long time on day one. Even if like for a casual player to play against me, let's say on day one, will probably not be a great experience. And so what we need is we need a really good MMR system, in my opinion. We need to have a large player base, which the free to play model I think really facilitates. And I think that's one of the biggest advantage of, let's say, like Apex Legends or League of Legends. And very importantly, and as something that I bring up, you have to have something to combat basically elo cheating, smurfing. I think these are the three big requirements. You need to get people to play your game. You need to kind of introduce them to a skill set of players that's somewhat around their skill level. And you need to have an ability for limiting people deliberately ruining that experience. Because unfortunately, as a League of Legends player, I will say that a large group of people actually enjoy ruining other people's multiplayer experience. And then that's a sad fact, but it just is, it is the case. It happened in World War. It happens in StarCraft 2. It happens in League. It happens in Apex.
To build a community out of it.
Yeah, pretty much. Sadly, I think one of the biggest things that I find that is pretty sad is, even though, so many people talk about like anti-toxicity measures, that this is a big thing, chat filters, et cetera, which is, that's for another video. That's huge topic in of itself.
Yeah, I don't like those either because
No,
yes, everything is nuclear, but
I don't agree with that. But that's again huge topic. It's so difficult
yeah.
to approach. But one thing that I will say that is absolutely the case is that Blizzard, StarCraft 2, League of Legends, Riot, a lot of these games have actually, I wouldn't even say frowned upon. They actually, people look positively to, hey, here's a grandmaster and he's playing in bronze or silver, and he's teaching people the game, except he's doing this, not once a year of like, hey, I'm actually trying to put educational content. He's doing it all the time. He's doing it all the time. I've seen so many bronze, the GM streams, League, same thing happens all the time. And, that gets people in this mindset of, these low level players don't matter and they deserve to suffer because, that's how we earned our chops and they need to go through the same thing. And you let that go for 5 or 7 years and you have a StarCraft 2 situation where the game is viewed as basically unapproachable and new people just will not touch it. They will not enter it because they're so intimidated. They're so scared by the community that's basically pushing them away, even while that community, even while that said community is growing ever smaller and they need new players. So one of Stormgate's biggest hurdles, in my opinion, is how to be more pro-social and how to actually, extend a hand to the new player, not make it easy. It doesn't mean that it has to be like, oh, this game is simplified and there's no skill of, and we're going to spoon feed you, but extend the hand of saying, yeah, it is difficult, but we're going to help you get there.
I have a solution.
Okay.
And this is the problem because I'm always been very cavalier with all of this, but okay. Yeah. So I will claim it as my own. I will defend them. We have the free for all community and HFFA.
Right.
And my personal journey in Brood War, I was never very competitive. C- an IC Cup. We played the casual modes. We played 3v3, 4v4, and yes, for our stat padding, because it was very important to have 5 stars on your account, for a 7v1 comp stomp that always resulted in a backstab.
Okay.
But the main thing is free for alls. I want to defend free for alls just for a brief moment.
Okay.
No allied victory, meaning there is not a group victory. There is only one winner that is the last person in the game. Okay? This is a battle royale, basically, the first of its kind before it was even a term. Okay? Alliances are allowed. You can ally, you can vision people, but you can't win together. Now, this is a game mode where you would think that the strong players would win. There's nothing further from the truth.
Sure.
You allow voice chat, you allow communication through chats, whatever, because then politics gets involved.
Mm-hmm.
And what you get is basically the playground, where rules can be written and unwritten as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
You have a multitude of skill levels in a single game. There are people who've never even touched the game before and don't know what a fucking siege tank is. And you have people who are just going at it at 300 APM. Those people will get identified, and the little guys will band together.
Definitely.
And there will be crying, there will be swearing, there will be people getting banned off of Mumble servers because, damn it, Lucky, that island. Anyway, that's been 15 years and still a problem. No, this is the thing. This is how you create communities. How did my main competitive game was Medal of Honor and Call of Duty, the first ones.
Yeah.
Open servers that have long since gone. There were guys that came into our server and completely owned us. Completely 40-0, nothing we could do. What is my response? How did that guy do that? Record the demo. I want to see what happens. Mm-hmm. And learn from that guy. And the second time he comes around, you test your mettle.
Definitely.
As again, that competitive gamer mindset and not the casual gamer. But the casual gamer can actually experience the full game through a free-for-all, because the game will go on for 30, 40 minutes sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Or in my case, if you cast some of these things, 3 hours.
Yeah.
And you can experience the full game without the pressure of a 1v1 or a 2v2 situation where you have to do things now. You can crawl into a little corner, rebuild your base, be a little cockroach that stays in there. Again, there will be hardship. There will be terrible games. There will be fury that you wasted an hour of your time. But that's where the casual game lives. The bullshittery, the tomfoolery. Look at BattleBit.
BattleBit's doing amazing. Yeah.
It is screwing around in a public server.
Yeah.
Grinding out your weapons. Progression in that way, and not the win-loss at the end of it. That is what it captured. If that was, every game had that. Quake had that. The Medal of Honor series, the the first Battlefield 1942 was that game. And if Stormgate can capture that, if they can create that little primordial ooze of casual players knocking each other on the head with blunt sticks, that is where it lives. And co-op is nice, it's casual, it's relaxed, but it is not the interaction. It is not the interaction with the real game.
Yeah.
Rant over.
I think what happened there, and because I know exactly what you're talking about, and I wanna reference a game that came out a few years ago, but I feel like completely did this right and actually developed an organic community, and that is Among Us. If you ever played Among Us, it's basically a social deduction game where you're trying to figure out, who basically is like an infiltrator, and everybody's like on one side except one or two people. But that was a game that basically didn't have inbuilt voice chat at the beginning. It was very bare bones. It didn't have a lot of features. But what they did was they basically let the community create the game itself. And so the community created the game. They were given a sandbox of which they could basically do whatever they want. And I think this is what Stormgate must do. They cannot restrict the player too much. I agree with what you said about free for all. I think, because I played free for all, in quite a few games, actually. Halo had a great free-for-all system, and it was a ranked free-for-all, basically, and Lone Wolves. And, StarCraft 2, I played some free-for-all games, a lot of fun. For newer players, the stress of the 1v1 or even a 2v2, even if you're with a partner, let's say I pair up with somebody that's new, they still feel like they must contribute. They feel like they're under a lot of intense pressure. My channel is about people also that suffer with anxiety conditions. And I know from talking with a lot of friends that also have anxiety conditions, it can be extremely nerve wracking. You're trying to basically, not let your teammates down. You're feeling completely under this, immense pressure. And ultimately, to learn, you need to be able to play around. You need to be able to try things. Maybe I'll just rush the battle cruisers and see what happens. You have to be able to explore and be creative. And I think free for all is definitely amazing. It's a great way for people to learn the game where it's not so intense, but yet it's not the campaign, it's not the co-op, it's not actually not interacting with people and playing against the AI. Because as much as I love AI, and I think maybe in the future it can be a little bit more organic and actually simulate a real player. Personally, I find AI games really only helpful for like I'm practicing builds. It's not going to help you against an actual opponent, a human opponent, very much. And I think the free fall is a great thing that you brought up. I think that's something Stormgate could
some of the players
bring
won't
in
be
easy.
better than the AI either.
Yeah, yeah. But it's also just because of how an AI reacts. Like a lot of people don't realize, an AI is oftentimes the advantage they're getting is they're getting artificially fake resources. They're basically cheating. And so it's not the way that a real player is going to be able to beat you. It's just giving you that kind of ability to, okay, let me optimize my build. Let me start my base. Let me actually see this map and see where I want to, let's say, maybe do like, my building setup, let's say it's Protoss, right? Which I'm assuming Stormgate from just what we've seen already, there will be building placement and there will be kind of actually Sim City going on. So I think very much same thing is going to be happening here. We're going to be going in.
Reasons why I switched to Zerg way back in the day because
Right.
walling with Terran on LT, holy crap.
Yeah, I basically, since I played Terran for 2 months in StarCraft 2, and then I played Protoss I played Protoss for 10 plus years. So, SimCity was something that basically was necessary. Yeah, let's pause. I agree. It's at 43 minutes now.
I said we all have our flaws, is what I said.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you said we should pause now. Yeah. I'm pretty, I've come to accept it. It's interesting. It's interesting on that point that for Brood War and for StarCraft 2, but I think way more at StarCraft 2. I think Brood War still I feel the community is a little bit more accepting. For StarCraft 2, and it came back to Wings of Liberty, it came back to Warpgate. I don't want to like completely bust open this can of worms, but StarCraft 2 had a real racial identity problem straight from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It had a lot of animosity. Specifically, I feel like between Terran and Protoss, I feel had the greatest animosity. Because I've noticed that most of my friends in the game actually have a ton of Zerg friends. And a lot of times Zerg and Protoss players can get along fairly well, I feel like. But I feel like specifically Terran players and Protoss players always had a lot of animosity. There was a lot of game issues they had, and just, I could do a whole podcast itself on what happened on Wings, how Warpgate was broken, how Warpgate was basically what, I don't want to say doom Protoss, but it led Protoss in a very bad direction for the rest of the life cycle of SE2. And it gave people a very bad impression of Protoss as a race. Personally, I think the abilities, I think the art, I think the lore, I think the way units look is something that I fell in love with and I would never part with. And that's for Stormgate what I'm looking for, is I'm just looking for the faction. I don't care if they're the strongest. I don't care if they're the weakest. I'm looking for a faction that captures my heart, that the art really pulls me in, that the voiceover lines really, tug at the heartstrings, and that I feel like I can identify with. We all have to have that sense of belonging in a race. You know, that's really what you're looking
Yeah.
for when you're picking a race in RTS.
I mean, it's a thing where I actually, it was in the Stormgate Discord that I was talking about. Like for Brood War, I still remember all my firsts. Like the first time I saw a siege tank, the first time, you know,
Mm,
during the demo, the xenomorphs, and all of those things. Like the first times you saw them in the campaign. Um, of course, I was younger then and more impressionable, and this was, a thing. Um, but yeah, and I think that's one thing that they'll do get right. And I mean, I don't have that much reservations for the team and everything. I think they're going to do great. But one thing that they're really tuned into is that identity that they have to set themselves apart and actually have a story that can evolve and um, can anchor a franchise to.
mm.
I don't have a problem with that. I think because I don't know if you originally played a lot of Brood War or if you played through the campaign back in the day.
No. So
Um,
the first time I played Brood
yeah.
War was actually, I want to say 2018. Oh, what was the year
Oh
that,
wow.
maybe it was 2016. What
16.
was the year that
Yeah.
Brood War Remastered came out and Blizzard was
Yeah.
pushing
It
it
was around
hard?
16, 15,
Yeah,
16.
2016. So I played Brood War. I had already been playing and got up to Diamond and was a StarCraft 2 player for many years. And then that got pushed. And, I was a huge fan of Day 9. I watched his dailies back in the day. It was a huge inspiration for me. Love that content. And,
Mhm.
he was pushing, hey, let's go back to Brood War at this point. So I started watching ASLs. I started watching Brood War content like BSL. Basically, all of that around that point, got into Brood War. And, I never felt like I have gotten to a decent level at Brood War. And by that, I mean, even for a casual fan. However,
Only
you
Flash has gotten to a decent level of Brood War.
why? That's kind of the feeling in Brood War. But I will say this: Brood War is a beautiful game. It's an amazing game, and it's an incredibly fun game to watch and play. I recommend to everybody just play Brood War, even if you don't. You're going to get nowhere because you'll really see what a game is like if you have a game based on pure skill, where you're giving nothing. You're given no advantages. You have to do literally every single task. That is the pure power fantasy of Brood War, where it really feels like anytime you get a victory, it's 100% because of you. And anytime you get a loss, it's 100% because of you. And I think that's something that Brood
It's
War did
very
that no other
comforting.
game has ever done. Is that it's just you versus your opponent. You might as well say that it's a pure skill contest in like in a phone booth type of situation because right from the beginning, I mean, you can get rushed very, very early in the game. Worker micro matters. I mean, mineral walking. There's so many concepts you need to even learn to be able to play the game, even at a basic level.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
and by the way, Brood War still has an incredibly active casual or casually competitive. Like you want
true.
to be
Yeah,
competitive Brood War, we have people of all your levels, and because that's the
yes,
thing, because it's a sport, you can stay at a certain level your entire life. There is no
definitely.
upwards progression just by playing.
Yeah,
I have completely and utterly accepted my level of Brood War,
yeah.
which is something that again is difficult to do. The realization, like you're having fun, you're playing against people of your level,
Hmm.
and this is where you're gonna stay unless you grind yourself to a pulp, which I did to get that C minus.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But the thing, very, very important change I want to make to your statement of it's your opponent, you and you versus your opponent. What it is it's you versus Brood War and your opponent versus Brood War, and
Hmm.
you're trying to to see who is better at
Yeah,
beating Brood War
true,
in that
true.
moment, that momentous thing, because of the decision trees, which you can make 1,000 mistakes. but you can alter your play style to compensate. That is something that StarCraft 2 didn't have. It had a very much reduced compared to Brood War. I always have to have this giant banner compared to Brood War. StarCraft 2 has a reduced decision making tree, which is still for the rest of all games ever a lot.
Yep.
But because of that, every decision was more important, and every mistake you made had more weight.
Definitely.
And that's why it was so snowbally. And that's why for a casual, like, oh, I guess I forgot to do this thing. Oh, here's my opponent. Now I die.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that was 15 minutes of life I'm never getting back. Fine. And in Brood War, you can crawl and scratch and keep going like, I'll micro single Marine to victory. I'll be Slayer's boxer one day. And sometimes you can break your opponent by doing that. And that is also, again, going back to free for all, you could experience that at your pitiful little level in a free for all, where you can claw and scratch at the biggest player in the game and still, give him a bloody nose before you go down majestically. But one of the things why I asked you the question of, have you played Brood War? Because it's the transition from Brood War to StarCraft 2 was a rough one. In terms of style, in terms of identity, which soured a lot of people. And that is a resentment that a lot of, let's say, right now it's no longer relevant because a lot of the dormant players are now no longer gamers.
Yeah, exactly.
But now, with the presentation of Stormgate, it clearly goes more to the Warcraft 3. They mentioned StarCraft 2 less, which is they know who they're talking to in these early stages.
Yeah.
More the Brood War, more the Warcraft 3. I see more Warcraft 3, but that's fine because Warcraft 3 was, in my eyes, a failed experiment that could have used better care. But let's face it, though, who could have balanced Warcraft 3 because it was such an odd beast. It was such a strange experiment that then birthed the MOBA genre. That it was going to be difficult, but
it was definitely going to be difficult. Yeah.
And now,
no, it's very interesting you bring up this point too, because I want to. When you were talking, something just popped up in my mind, and I think this is a very important point to kind of bring up. When I've discussed Stormgate to players that have played StarCraft 2, you have the exact same thing that Brood War players went into StarCraft 2 with, which is there's a lot of resentment, guys. A lot of times what I find is that when a player plays one RTS for a long period of time, all they view a new RTS as is, okay, this is going to steal player base. I'm tied to this game. I want this to be basically just a carbon copy that has a different number iteration. So like a lot of StarCraft 2 players have told me, listen, I don't like Stormgate. It's obvious that it's just Warcraft 4. It's basically just a copy of Warcraft. It's going to only hurt. It's not like StarCraft 2. I don't like it. I don't agree with this sentiment whatsoever. I think that Stormgate is going to be pretty much a middle point between what StarCraft 2 did and what Warcraft 3 did. I think that this is a big problem in the RTS genre. This is a huge problem. There's so much hate between, the Brood War community, the StarCraft 2 community, StarCraft 2 AoE 4 community, AoE 4 Command and Conquer. It's very strange, guys. It's very strange because most of the time when I've talked to, let's say, like RTS players or like MOBA players, let's say Battle Royale. That's a great example. A lot of people that are friends with me play Apex. We play casually. We played PUBG back in the day. Obviously that game, very much like StarCraft 2, is kind of, feels like, to me at least, this is my opinion, but it feels like it's going into its twilight years and kind of not progressing in a good way. But a lot of people are more open. We should kind of understand that these games exist in a genre. They're very similar. They do have their differences. Maybe we should talk between groups. But in RTS, there's always been a very, elitist group of, I want to play this one game. All other games are trash. We're not going to play those. And I feel that's very bad because as somebody that's loved StarCraft 2, and I love StarCraft 2 to my core, I love watching Brood War. I like playing Brood War. Personally, I don't understand this. I think it's super negative, and I think those same people that are going to try to basically, bomb Stormgate without even giving it a chance. Um, the problem is, and we, this is one of our main points of discussion: Blizzard, evolution of StarCraft 2 and StarCraft, and where Blizzard is going. But in my opinion, the people that are going to stay on StarCraft 2 are basically dooming themselves to the fate of the Titanic. StarCraft 2 is going down. Blizzard does not care anymore about StarCraft 2. It's very, very apparent, in my opinion. And I think that, they need to look at other options. Yeah.
Yeah, no. It's, well, for me,
What are your thoughts?
yeah, I'm trying to wrap it around because
Yeah, it's a hard topic. It's a big topic.
No, yeah, it's always been like that, right? The tribalism in games has always been like that, but of course, in competitive games, it is 1,000-fold because I am good now. Do not take this away from me. My skills might not be applicable somewhere else, right? And yeah, the in terms of where a developer stands, of course, Frost Giant, this is their first game. They're gonna make other games, guys. By the way, don't worry. But this is their anchor point. This is a franchise anchor point. They're going to do this, and of course, completely unaware people are going to walk in and open the door and go, "Oh dear, what's going on here?" Because there will be that battle of wills. You will have your Age of Empires people and your I don't know, Beyond All Reason, Total Annihilation people come in and take a look.
Sure.
And a lot of MOBA players, a lot of League of Legends and Dota people are going to be attracted to this game.
I think so. I agree 100% about that.
And it's going to, come down to how can the community. There are going to be some fundamental organizations. There are going to be some fundamental communities. They will be a melting pot for a little while, and we'll see. It will be quite fun. We can be assured that Frost Giant will cling on to this because that's the problem of abandonment. That is a thing that is very interesting, and that's why I had this hard time wrapping my head around it. For Brood War players, we didn't need Blizzard. Blizzard had been gone for a while, right? It is the resentment that we as Brood War players have is because Blizzard came back in 2016.
Yeah.
Right? After so long, I made a beautiful... I'll link it to you.
Sure.
I made a very angry rant on Team Liquid on a blog post for that. Because it's basically like they are claiming us again, right?
Yeah.
They were, hello, we're back.
Whenever they want to monetize a product specifically, they will
Exactamundo, because we had community servers, we had launchers, we had solved problems that now re-originated with remastered, right? And now you're gonna feel what's gonna come, of course. So all of that was broken. Definitely. Problems that we'd fixed for years. I say we, the community, fixed it for years. Suddenly we're back.
Yeah. You have the Bethesda
development
thing.
had already been stopped.
Yeah.
And now it's a game as a service.
Yeah. Oh, I hate that.
So we are completely locked in.
Yeah.
And the frustration was that we had to learn off of Twitter in December of, I think it was 2016 still, or maybe 2017, that the guy who was running the remasters is like, "Oh yeah, no, I haven't been working at Blizzard for months now."
Yeah.
I'm like, what? That was Brood War, right? Okay. Then a little thing called Reforged happened.
Oh God!
And we were screaming from the roofs, like, "Don't do it! Like, don't listen to us!
Don't do it!"
And
don't do it, guys. Pain incoming.
Like, we've seen this happen.
Just
And
just
no, it
whip
wasn't,
yourself
and it
right
was
now.
worse.
It was
Yeah,
We
it was worse.
Forged was